Welcome everybody. We got a pretty full house today, and it's been we were nice enough to give most of you a few weeks off of doing our every other week check-ins here. Let everybody enjoy the summer. I know decent percentage of the country, decent percentage you all back to school, which is kind of hard to believe up here in the Northeast. Kind of jarring.
Yeah, it's already.
Bless you.
Hopefully you all had a nice break for part of the summer. Got to unwind and disconnect, hopefully.
Certainly earned it. If you would, before we jump in, Peg and I will do quick intros in a minute here, but we always like to hear where everybody's from. Tell us where you are in the country. Throw that in the chat if you're up for it. We're usually very well represented geographically here. So if you want to tell us what high school or what city, what state, whatever. So yeah, here we go. We're all over the place as we tend to be here. Just the way we like it, Peggy.
Yep.
Awesome.
Love it.
Okay, cool. So just by way of brief introduction, for those of you that are new to kind of our ecosystem here, I'm Matt Carpenter, one of the founders at College Aid Pro, and our kind of whole purpose is to help families and help school counselors navigate what you all know is a very challenging situation, right? And specifically, our focus is on the financial aid scholarship piece of the puzzle, right? And especially this year, it's always hard, right? It's always challenging, but this year, especially with these FAFSA changes, there's some wins in here, but there's also some losses. We're in for an interesting year, I guess, to put it mildly. So our job is to get everybody educated, right? And try to help everyone figure out, well, what can we control? What can we not control? And then, based on that, how should we be navigating this thing? And for you all, how can you make sure that everybody is taking advantage of the pros and cons of this, at your particular high school. So that's what we're here to talk about today. And this is what we do almost every day, right? So just if you're new to us, just stay in touch, stay plugged in, because we're not going anywhere. And obviously today the focus is the FAFSA changes, but we'll be talking about stuff that's topical throughout the year, all the time. So and by the way, I'm here in the Boston area, just north of the city, in a little city called Salem, Mass, here, home of the witch trials. Peg, if you want to say hello, then I'll do my little intro follow-up, and then we can dive in.
Yeah, so I'm Peg Keogh, been with CAP for a couple of years. I've been doing this sort of work for well over a decade. So just my title is Director of Education. So this is what I love. I love teaching, sharing, and anything we can do to support you. I'm always in awe of what you do. I have 2 kids that have finished high school and knew the counselors, and it's crazy how much you have on your plate. So this whole piece is just another kind of wrinkle, right, in this whole thing. So like, as Matt said, if we can step in and support you, help you understand it better, so that the students and the families that you're supporting can navigate this, because as we all know, it tends to be a really stressful process for families. I don't think it needs to be as stressful as people make it, but it is what it is, right? And so this just adds another wrinkle. So that's what we're here for. And I'm pretty sure everybody here, even if you're familiar with this, you'll learn something that's a bit of a nuance that maybe you didn't know. And I've been on all the FSA webinars and digging in, and even for me doing this forever and ever, like I'm watching these very diligently. It's kind of complex, some of the changes on the back end, which we're not going to get in the weeds totally on that today, but just so you understand what's really coming at your families when this new FAFSA comes out.
And please, ask all your questions. Let's make this thing interactive.
Put your questions in the Q&A, not the chat, because when we're each talking, we'll be manning the Q&A. So I know we said put your location in the chat, but please keep your questions over in the Q&A.
You said it. So just by briefly, I'll touch on this and then we'll close with it as well. But for those of you that are new with us, we partner with hundreds of high schools all over the country, largely just providing the education, right? So obviously this year, specifically in September and October, we're coming in to teach your students and your families, your parents, and obviously you as counselors, what they need to know about these FAFSA changes, in addition to obviously how this whole financial aid process works overall. And then what we've done, how we've evolved over the years, is that we found you can't just do 1 or 2 presentations of the year. You got to talk about what's going on right now. So in September and October, we'll be talking about how this whole thing works and the FAFSA changes. October and November, we'll go line by line through the CSS profile. And then December this year, obviously, as we'll talk about, we'll go line by line through the FAFSA. And then after the new year, we talk about, okay, now we've applied to school, we've applied for financial aid, let's go get private scholarships. We come back usually March, April to say, okay, you've been accepted, you've got your award letter. What are we looking at? How do we translate this? And then how do we appeal for more money? And then finally, after May 1st, the last presentation in our kind of standard series is that we will talk about how to pay the bill, right? You know where you're going, you know what it's going to cost. But if you need to take a loan, what loan should your family take? Student, parent, plus loan versus Sally Mae. If you have money, should you use the 529 first versus grandparent contributions, these types of things. So this is our standard template for our education, our curriculum, but some schools do all of them. Some schools have some different ones. These aren't the only presentations that we do. But please ask to meet with us, talk with us. I'll put my link in the chat here in a second here if you're interested in anything. If you think you might want something like this in your school or any of this. And the other thing that we have that we'll get into a little bit, because it's really helpful for case studies, is our platform, our software, College Aid Pro software, that I think the easiest way to quickly explain it is it's basically like a score or a Naviance of financial aid and scholarships, where each student, each family has their own portal and they can figure out, what's my SAI going to be? Am I going to get financial aid? Am I going to get scholarships? At which colleges, among other things. But that's kind of a brief introduction of how we generally partner with schools. I'm going to put my link in the chat here if you're interested in just setting up a quick time. And again, I'll do this at the end here as well. To speak with me about how we might be able to work with your school, please book a time, and I'm happy to do that. So without further ado, let's talk some of these exciting FAFSA changes, Peggy.
All right, here we go. Okay. All right. So if you're not familiar with us at College Aid Pro, I mean, this literally is our mission. And what we're doing today is part of our mission. We're helping families shop smarter for college through you, because you're one of the players in this space, right? So there we are. So let's talk about like the high level stuff, and then we'll get in the weeds a little bit here. So when does this take effect? This is for the 24-25 school year. And this actually goes live, and I'm sure most of you know this, right? The Department of Ed came out a couple months ago and said, hey, we're moving that typical October 1 date to December 2023. They haven't told us the date yet. We're hoping it's close to the 1st. I'd be surprised if it falls flat on the 1st, but hopefully early December. This is a one-time change, and especially for parents that are used to this system, it might kind of rock their world a little bit. The CSS profile, on the other hand, is not changing, right? So that's a whole nother piece of the puzzle here, is how is this affecting the CSS profile, and what does that mean for families? But sometime in December, the minute we know, we will shoot out an email. We will let all of you know you're in the CAP community now. So that's the big one. This is the first class that's affected, are these rising seniors, the class of 2024. So I know, as Matt said, school's starting, but for some places like here, I'm outside of Seattle, it's going to hit the rising senior class that's starting soon. Release date is December 3rd. Prior year, this is all based on the 2022 tax returns. That hasn't changed. Prior years is still in place. Current students are not, like in the legislation, they're not grandfathered. So this is going to be some of the changes that Matt's going to talk about in a few minutes for families that are used to a certain package, and then all of a sudden it can change. But there is language in the legislation that allows the schools, for their endowment money, to do what they want. It's their endowment money. As I said, I've been on the federal student aid webinars and I'm closely listening to how they present this. So just keep that in mind. All right. So, there's the good, the bad, the ugly. Matt said losses. I like to call them they're just challenges for some families, right? Put like a slightly different spin on it, but huge positive things for your low income families. The Pell Grant is going to increase, and it's not just going to be based on your SAI and is that lower than the maximum Pell. They're also going to look at the adjusted gross income compared to poverty levels. We're not going to get in the weeds on those specifics here, but that's a huge positive, is that for low income families, Congress really thought about that and has made some changes that will be better for them. FAFSA is going to be easier to file. I'm going to show you in a minute. Instead of about 108 questions, it's in the mid 30s. So should be easier for families. There can be up to a negative 1,500 SAI, whereas in the past, if an EFC went negative, it went up to 0. So again, that's another huge positive for low income families. And then these other ones here, I'm going to touch on with their own slide. But this is kind of the list of the stuff. So it's not, there are some positive things here. So as we all know, EFC, and I still have to keep catching myself, EFC is gone. We're now calling it the Student Aid Index. It's a name change.
Sorry, Peg, we're getting a lot of questions because we do have a lot of slides and a lot of stuff to go over today. A lot of questions as to whether or not we'll share the slides. I know you're very protective of the slides, but you were kind of teasing that maybe you'd be willing to.
Yeah, so I said to Matt before we went live, because I usually don't share slides, but with this group, I think this week you guys can have it on your desk as your resource. We just ask that you use it for those purposes and, don't reproduce it or anything like that. But yeah, don't worry. I don't want you to feel like you're madly writing everything down, because then it's hard to listen.
You guys should know that Peggy does not give out slides easily at all. So this is an exception. So you should, just know
Yes,
that.
I have a lot of respect for everybody that's on here. You guys do some amazing work that I can't imagine doing. So kudos to everybody. Okay, so it's a name change. There are some differences in the calculation that we're talking about today. The SAI can be negative. We talked about that. There's allowances for students living at home or with family that they're making the colleges calculate that differently. So again, that's a positive for some families. As I said earlier, questions are going down, although I talked to somebody the other day that said they have 5 demographic questions and they call it 1. So we'll see. They're doing a demo actually tomorrow, and I know it's nerdy, but I am super excited to be on there for an hour and a half with FSA. So I will actually be seeing the actual FAFSA that's going to go live, but the questions are going down considerably. So this is a change. There's a concept called untaxed income. So these are things that in the financial aid world, they include in a calculation of an SAI, whereas Uncle Sam on the tax return doesn't look at them. And so the Congress made changes to things that are considered untaxed income. What you see on the slide here, these are all things that are going to continue or are new to be untaxed income. The only thing that's new is the foreign income, which I don't think is really going to affect any of you. That's people that work with expats and stuff mostly. But there is a big change with retirement contributions, and that's a big one that affects a lot of families that are saving in a 401k or 403b. And Matt doesn't like me to go into huge detail, but I'll go a little further. If a family has any pre-tax retirement contributions that show up on their 1040, those are still going to be included. But if they don't, where I see here, this is the language they use, delineated on the federal tax return. If they don't, then they're no longer going to be included. And the biggest example of that is the 401k 403b that people make, shows up on their W-2, but it lowers their wages. It doesn't show up on the tax return. So this is huge for families. In the past, each parent was saving $20,000, $10,000. That ended up being untaxed income. That is no longer the case. And then the other stuff that you see listed here, we're going to talk about some of this. This is no longer untaxed income. So this is going to help certain families where it's applicable. But that one, the bullet number 1, is applicable almost across the board to a lot of people. So cash support and money paid on the student's behalf. Again, in the past, if grandma had a 529 and wanted to help, that would be considered untaxed income to the student. People were divorced and the non-custodial parent had a 529 and wanted to help their own child. That would be considered income to that child for the year. That has all gone away. So this is really huge for any families where this is applicable, because the student income is assessed at 50%. So that could really shoot up an SAI. That's completely off the table now. So that's a huge win. That's a huge win for families. Again, for divorced families, if there's child support is now considered an asset to the recipient. That amount for the tax year before, not income. And as you see on the slide, income is assessed at a much higher level in the SAI calculation than an asset of the parent. So that's a nice win for divorced families. Can make a big difference. Cost of attendance, we all know what that is. The colleges are required to be much more transparent about this, which will help you, which will help your families, helps all of us. So these are all the pieces of the COA, and routinely when I go to try and find these on websites, sometimes it's so convoluted, it's hard to back in. Other schools are good about it. They are going to be required to be very transparent about the breakdown of their cost of attendance. So that's another win, where we're always pushing colleges to be more transparent about merit aid, everything, because it helps you do your jobs. It helps families navigate this. So that's a win. There's 2 allowances. I'm not going to get in the weeds on this. You'll get the slide, but there's an income protection allowance, which is actually going up. And then there's an asset protection allowance. And what that means is when they calculate the income they're going to include and the asset base, then they take the allowance off. So it just lowers it. The asset protection allowance has been going down for years. Congress didn't even touch this. I always tell parents, don't even consider it. It's so low that it's not a game changer. The income protection allowance, if the family's fairly affluent, you'll take any allowance you can get, but it's not a huge game changer, but it has gone up. It has gone up with the legislation. So I will turn this over to you now, Matt.
Thank you. So this is one of the biggies that initially, as I was looking at this, I was seeing it as a total loss. I've backed off from that a little bit. And just for some context, if we kind of pause and zoom out for a second here, right? If I had to just kind of make a headline for what are the major changes for FAFSA this year, right? What is this going to impact? Who is this going to impact? I think I can boil it down to 4, right? I think there's 4 headlines here. And one of them is the positive, and Peg spent a decent amount of time going over this. And that's the fact that basically there's going to be more money for the families that need it the most, right? So the families with the least amount of resources, there's going to be more money for them. There's going to be more Pell Grant dollars there, right? That number is increasing. It's going to be a little bit easier to qualify for, right? In terms of the income restrictions and things like this, and actually navigating the FAFSA. I think, there's this really heartbreaking statistic that we talk about a lot internally, and that's the fact that roughly 2/3 of low-income families start the FAFSA and don't complete it. Okay, which is really just, it's horrible, right? I mean, that means that these students are getting 0 financial aid, or maybe they're not going to college because they got no financial aid. And so much of that is because the FAFSA itself is too cumbersome, right? And maybe there's language barriers, or the student is on their own here. They don't have support at home, and this form is just kind of too much. So that's the huge win of these 4 that I think universally we're psyched about. I think the challenge is that basically what the Department of Education said was, we're not going to pay for this, right? We're going to get more money for the families that need it the most, but it's not coming from our pocket. It's going to come from 3 kind of buckets of families. divorce separated families, 2 household families, right, which we'll talk about in just a second here, small business owners, okay, which we'll highlight, and then families with more than 1 kid in college at once, right? So families that have multiple siblings, multiple students in college and at the same time in any given year. Those are the 3 types of households that are going to fund this program essentially, right? So let's start with the FAFSA and divorced and separated families, right? So and you can probably click to the next slide here, Peggy. I know we have a couple of slides here, and probably some of them are a little bit redundant, but only 1 household, as most of you probably know, completes the FAFSA. Okay, and historically, it was whoever the student lived with the most, or the custodial household. So if the student lived with mom more, mom completed the FAFSA. If that parent was remarried, it was the step parents' information that went on that as well, because that was where the student lives the most, the custodial household. Obviously, there's some gray areas there, and that's not a perfect. I don't know that that's a perfect way to handle this. And in their defense, this is a challenge. I understand the Department of Education's challenge here. But I think we took a step backwards, because now moving forward, who completes the FAFSA? And I think you can go to the next slide here, Peggy.
Sure.
Who completes the FAFSA is the household that provides the most financial support. And I guess maybe one more here. Okay, so it doesn't matter where the student lives. It doesn't matter who claims the student as an exemption on tax returns. The only thing that matters, the only thing that dictates who should complete the FAFSA is whichever parent, okay, biological parent, provides the most financial support. So this is going to be messy. Okay. And I've had a ton of conversations with families that are somewhere in this, that fit somewhere in this category. And they're like, okay, well, yeah, this parent provides more financial support, but there's no relationship. There's no way that they're going to complete the FAFSA and be cooperative rather. Other households, I think a lot of households are saying, well, okay, well, this one, my ex pays child support each month, but I'm the one that pays for the mortgage. I'm the one that buys groceries, every week. I'm the one that's paying all these kind of here and there out of pocket expenses, spending money and paying for this club and that sport and all these things. I don't know. How are we supposed to know who provides more financial support? So I think probably a lot of you are hearing this going, yeah, I can see this being an absolute mess. So that's kind of, I think, a big part of the negative, in addition to the fact that the thought process is that for most families, I think the Department of Education is going, well, probably the parent that provides the most financial support is the one that has more means, is the one that's going to give that family the higher SAI, and therefore we're giving them less financial aid, right? But I think there's an opportunity here. Okay, I think there's an opportunity because, especially if I'm one of these families that fits somewhere in that gray area, and there's a lot of you, right? Of like, yeah, we're not really sure who provides most financial support. Well, let's be smart here. Let's be strategic. Let's figure out a way to have the parent with the least, the lower income, the lower assets, the one that's going to give you the lower SAI, be the one to complete the FAFSA. Okay, that's going to make you eligible for more need-based financial aid, and because you have some control over this, right? Especially if it's close. Let's make sure that the household, again, that's going to have the lower SAI is the one that's providing the more financial support, right? Obviously, it's not always close. That's not every household. Some of them, there's not even an argument to be made. But I think you can see the challenges that this is going to pose for a lot of families, and also hopefully some opportunities here. And the thing is here too, this is kind of off the record, and I'm not saying that this is right or wrong or whatever, but I've had a lot of families approach me and go, listen, okay, maybe this other parent provides more financial support, but there's no way they're going to cooperate. There's no relationship. We're not going to be able to complete the FAFSA if we leave it up to that other parent. What do I do? And I've been recommending do the FAFSA. Okay, that's the student lives with you. You're the one that has been raising, this kid. How important it is to qualify for need-based financial aid. And we know we don't do the FAFSA, we're not getting need-based financial aid. Let's not be beholden to this other uncooperative parent because of this rule change, and we have completely no control. So I'm not endorsing that and saying it should be a universal recommendation. That's kind of, again, off the record here of how I've been advising in situations like that. And I'm sleeping fine at night, you know, with that advice, to be perfectly honest. I mean, I don't want the kid getting punished for something that they cannot control because of an uncooperative parent in this rift, you know, between their parents, right? So tricky, totally tricky, but that's how I've been doing it again in real practice, I guess.
Yeah, and then if people want to reach out to the school and have a conversation with them, I mean, the schools sometimes they're not that great on how they behave, but a lot of times they're not the enemy, right? All of this. So we've had questions in here, how are the state deadlines, everybody's scrambling to figure out how they're going to function with this December change, you know? So everybody's trying to figure it out, basically.
There's
and
no
so
question.
put in a question that is great about, hey, do you know when the net price calculators are going to be updated? Net price calculators have never had to be updated. So keep that in mind. I know that Congress required them to do this over a decade ago, which was, you know, okay, you're making them do it. You provide a template. The federal template is useless. A lot of schools are using a better template, but the net price calculators, I just want to just tell everybody here, you got to be really careful with them. And since we've created our software, we've had people reach out and say, I'm dealing with one right now, actually, where it's like, hey, the net price calculator is saying that, but your software is saying that. They're dramatically different. And more often than not, when we get in the weeds and really figure this out, or we actually see what the college gives the student, which happened to me last year, they give them what we're projecting, not what their net price calculator is projecting. So I'm not saying that to promote us. I'm saying that to say, be careful with the net price calculator. So I answered the person, I have no idea when they're going to update those and if they're even required to. So just be really careful that that's the be end all, because sometimes it can lead families astray because it's not accurate. And there's some legal stuff at the beginning of most of them. If a family is divorced or separated, they pretty much say this isn't going to be that accurate. So just keep all that in mind.
Yeah. I mean, if I could play that back, essentially you said our net price calculator is perfect and nobody else's can be trusted.
That's not what I said.
Okay.
But we do have data, because we
Yeah.
always take it seriously and say, hey, are we off? What's going on here? And I won't say the school we're dealing with now around home equity, but we're digging in on it, because it doesn't make sense what they say they do, but then their net price calculator is showing this family a different result, and we're going by what they say they do. So there's just all these nuances.
Awesome. Go ahead, Peggy. I think you can go to the next slide for us here. So, you know, here's the other massive one. I'm sure most of you have caught wind of this, and that's the fact that, you know, and again, I flagged it with my little preamble here, but no more discounts at the federal methodology schools, which is most colleges. Okay. No discounts for siblings, right? And so they don't care if you have twins. They don't care if you have two that are 2 years apart. That's irrelevant. Even if you have the same income and the same resources, effectively, for a lot of families that fit in this scenario, the cost of college is going to double, right? And there's exceptions, and that's not at every school, and we'll talk about some of these. And there's still you would be shocked to know that there's still a meaningful amount of colleges that don't know how they're going to handle this. I'm talking about specifically private colleges, right? The public schools, we know. And this is the deal. And the other thing, and again, and Peg mentioned this at the top, is that folks are not getting grandfathered in. That's another thing that I was a little bit surprised about. I thought they might grandfather families in, right? So you can imagine that there's a lot of these families that are going to be completely blindsided in the coming weeks. Or, well, I guess it'll be a year from now, right? But a year from now, when they get their bills and it's double, right? Their income and assets stay the same, but now they have, you know, this rule went away, and the cost of their college bills are going to double. So it's pretty wild. I will say that a lot of the colleges we've talked to have said that, hey, listen, we're going to follow suit, and folks are not grandfathered in. However, are going to expect and likely consider families that appeal. So, as you're hearing these students and these families come back to you to say, our bill doubled this year, you're going to want to encourage them to appeal. Hey, go back to them, kick and scream, for lack of a better term here, to say the rug got pulled out from underneath us. In order for us to stay at the college, we're going to need to have the same or similar package that we got, because there's been no change in our scenario. And again, the cost has doubled. Colleges are, a lot of the schools that we've talked to said we will consider those on a case-by-case basis and likely be pretty lenient. So again, that's how you're going to want to coach that. Now, and I'll show you some examples in a little bit here. Go ahead, Peg, please. Yeah, and this is, and again, once we actually go over some case studies and get into our platform, we'll kind of highlight the fact that, yes, this is going away at federal methodology schools, but there's still a meaningful percentage of the colleges and most of the kind of, quote unquote, name brand colleges that the federal methodology, these FAFSA changes are not going to apply to them at all, because they use the CSS profile, they use the institutional methodology. Essentially, they're their own business and they can operate however they want. And most of these schools are going to continue to have some type of variable baked into their formula to account for more than one kid in school at once. So it could be really interesting where all of a sudden, where the state school initially was more affordable, well, now it's going to be the private school because of this sibling discount.
Yeah, it is going to make everything more interesting. And I didn't say this earlier, but on the FAFSA, they are still going to ask how many kids are in school. It's just not going to be part of the SAI calculation, but the colleges will know it. And they've called this out on the webinars, and they've followed with, and as I said earlier, the colleges can decide how they want to take that into account when they're giving out their endowment money. For federal purposes, they will not. So just keep that in mind.
And this is something that, again, it's probably too late, guys. Peg was making fun of me for even suggesting that we share it today, but I'm fighting tooth and nail to the very end. We started a petition when this rule change first was announced to try to prevent some of what we consider to be really bad changes, right, to these new FAFSA rules, specifically the sibling one. Again, I don't like the divorce one. We'll talk about small business owners in a second here. But to try to prevent some of these from going through, we gave it an honest effort. We've got about 70,000 signatures, but essentially decision makers are like, until you get 100,000, you're not going to move the needle. You're not even going to get in the room with us. So again, it's probably too little, too late, but if you're moved by this at all, please sign it, please share it, at least to, let these people know that we're paying attention, if nothing else. But
yeah, I put the link in the chat. You can also use the QR code that's on the screen too.
Okay. So here's where I want to really focus on, so we got some questions about appeals, right? Technically, all colleges cannot deny appeals anymore. Now, personally, again, I think this is kind of BS. Just because these colleges are saying they have to hear appeals, I don't know that that's going to change anything in terms of how open they are, to actually use appeals, right? And a lot of these schools can still, for example, I'll pick on the University of Alabama, and they're one of many, so this is a little unfair to single one out, but a lot of the big state flagship universities, even if you appeal, they don't open appeals until September, right? So your kid's got to be on campus already before they're even going to look at it. So you've already got to commit. So you can imagine what type of leverage you actually have. I think that's a very nice way of them saying, we're not giving you anything else, and we know we got you already. So yeah, they have to hear appeals, but I think that's fluff. Okay. Here's what is really probably deserves a slide in and of itself. And small business owners, right? So the rule historically, at least for the last couple of decades, has been that if you're a business owner and you have less than 100 employees, we're not going to look at that business at all. We're not going to look at the assets. We're not going to look at the valuation. If you have money in your business accounts, don't put it on the FAFSA, because we're not going to hold it against you. Okay, this is for business and farm owners. This is going away. And not only, it's not like it's going from 100 employees down to 50 employees or 10 employees. It's going from 100 to 0. There is no allowances for small business owners anymore. They don't care if you are a sole proprietor, right? It's just you are the business. They don't care if you have a small farm that you run to sustain a living and it's just you and your partner, kids, whoever. They're going to be looking at it and holding it against you, for lack of a better term, in calculating the SAI. So this is going to have a massive, massive impact on anybody that has any type of self-employment, right? And again, whether it's a farm owner, business owner, I'm worried about this one, arguably the most, especially families that have no idea what they're doing when they're navigating this process, which is most families, which was my family, which was my friends and their families, right? Most people that I've met my whole life, even if you're really sophisticated, if you're a financial planner, it doesn't matter, right? This is such a little niche world in and of its own. And people, I'm thinking about these small business owners. I'm thinking these folks that are in the trades that they're not as comfortable. Of course, there are exceptions with these types of forms, and they're going to put numbers and overvalue their business, and it's going to kill their financial aid eligibility when it shouldn't. So this is a complex one, and we can't give like firm recommendations on just like kind of a universal level, right? Or make blanket recommendations here. But what I can kind of tell you in short, when we're working with families, especially again, these small businesses and sole proprietors, we're saying, listen, your business is not worth anything. Do not feel uncomfortable putting $0 down there, because if you cease to show up for work tomorrow, there's no business, right? You're not a publicly traded company. You've never had a formal valuation, right? So do not feel uncomfortable putting 0 for your business, right? Of course, this is not everybody, and there's exceptions, and every situation is unique. But as just a general talk track, don't be afraid to advise families to say, if you're going to err on one side, do not overvalue yourself. This is where you want to be pessimistic, right? When putting a number down there, if you put any number down there in terms of valuation of your business, that's a huge one. And the other thing is, guys, don't forget about your liabilities. Again, I'm just thinking of some people that I know, and I got this question from, and again, I mentioned the trades earlier. I'm thinking of a buddy of mine that was in my neighborhood that's in the trades and had these types of questions for me. And he's telling me about what he has in his business accounts, and he's got a dump truck, and and he's like, yeah, so I was going to put down, and he mentioned a big number. I'm like, do you have any debt in your business? And he's underwater essentially with the loans that he has and his credit cards and, all these things. And it's like, and how do we not have that conversation? He would have literally disqualified himself from need-based financial aid across the board, right? So these are the types of things that I'm really worried about these small business owners overall, and kind of left to their own devices because of this new rule. Or I just know a percentage of them are going to mistakenly disqualify themselves from need-based financial aid.
Yeah, and if you said this, I apologize, and I'll just be saying it again because I'm looking at all the questions. But some consulting businesses, your value, unless you have a bunch of money in a checking savings business account, could be 0. It sounds crummy, but like a consultant who's on their own, they get hit by a bus, as bad as that would be, that's their business and it's gone. So some parents feel like they're lying if they put 0. And for some businesses, it could be a very low valuation. So as Matt's saying, this is really something where people might need some guidance to kind of think through it, because I always say, when you're filling out these forms, always be honest, don't overshare, and don't overestimate on anything, your value of your home or anything. It needs to be honest, but the lowest reasonable, honest valuation for a business, for a home, across the board.
Peg, I would appreciate it if you would listen when I'm speaking, please. Are you,
From
but you
somebody who
can't,
repeats me all the time when they're listening, yes, thank you.
well, no, I mean, but you can't hear that enough times, right? And to your point, it's like, oh, I better put something in there. No, don't. Okay. And then make it a conversation with these colleges. We welcome the narrative. We welcome the conversation. And this is a huge arbitrary gray area, right? Like what you say your business is worth, if you're trying to sell it, is different than what the buyer thinks it's worth and the whole deal. So I think we hammered that point, but it's just such an important one and nobody's talking about it. Nobody is talking about that. So,
Yeah,
okay.
this one I hit. I think I got this one, that the Pell is, it's multifaceted how they're calculating the Pell, which is good for families. It's not just the one step at, nope, you're not Pell eligible. So there will be some families that are Pell eligible that pre this legislation were not. That's the bottom line. Okay.
And go ahead. I'll share for a second here
Yep.
because I want to go over, and I think it's helpful kind of to actually look at this through an actual family's lens at some actual colleges, right? So for those of you that aren't familiar, this is our platform, is College Aid Pro's platform, and again, I would equate it to being like a score, an Allowance of financial aid and scholarships. If you haven't just created a dummy account or whatever, go in, create one, bang around in there. You know, I know a lot of you have it for all your students at your high schools, and if you want to, you can write into us, or when we meet, for those of you that choose to meet, I'll set you up with a coupon code where you can upgrade to the premium version and have all the bells and whistles. But anybody can create a free account. And when you do that, right, so families answer a couple of questions, and the first thing that they're going to see are these SAIs staring them in the face, right? Which is what we want. We want you to have to start with a foundation of your eligibility for need-based financial aid or lack thereof, right? And then again, even if you have a lot of experience with financial aid and you've been doing this for a long time, I know plenty of folks that didn't know that there was more than one SAI, okay? And there's 3 SAIs. Now it's going back down to 2, so there's only going to be the federal and institutional. And then, of course, within each of these buckets, there's variations. Just because the school uses the institutional SAI or institutional methodology, they're not all created equal, and NYU is different than Amherst, who's different than Stanford, who's different than Rice, okay? Now, it's not uncommon that the institutional SAI is significantly higher than the federal SAI. And for this family, is a family of 4 in my little home city here in Beverly, Mass. And essentially the institutional SAI is double. Now, why is that? 2 big reasons here. And again, this is not crazy. Number one, they own their home and they have a meaningful amount of equity. Most colleges that use the institutional SAI consider home equity to varying degrees, okay? Whereas the federal methodology does not. The other one here is this is a 2-household family. The parents are divorced here, and institutional schools, again with exceptions, will look at both households. Okay, so you know, for whereas again the federal school will not moving forward. It's only the household that provides the most financial support. But this is why, right? And in a lot of ways, that's more than families need to know, or you as school counselors need to know. But the takeaway, and I know just about all of you understand this, is that for most families, it's not the sticker price of the college that's going to dictate how affordable or not a college is going to be. It's their net cost, right? And so we talked about net price calculators and all that. We have very, very robust, I would say the most accurate net price calculator you're going to find anywhere in my experience. And also it's every college all in one place, right? And it's right away. So any family can figure out, well, or you as a counselor, well, what's this school actually going to cost, you know, this kid? Are they going to get need-based financial aid? Are they going to get scholarships, right? You would think NYU and Amherst, you know, very similar colleges, are, you know, similar in the sense that they are really competitive, really popular, really expensive. But the price point is wildly different. Why is that the case? They both use the institutional methodology. Well, NYU looks at all your home equity if you own your home. Amherst looks at next to nothing. BU is somewhere in between. So that's where there's these really intricate details that are vary from one college to the next. Again, let kind of the algorithm do the work for you. Okay. But we're going to go back and I'm going to ask some kind of audience participation here so we can look at some actual colleges and drill down a little bit deeper in these case studies. But just to give you an idea of what everybody has access to here. Obviously, first, we just want to know a knee-jerk reaction. What does this college cost me? But then, can my family afford it? What's it going to cost over 4 years with inflation, with other siblings going in and out versus my family's budget? How much are we going to have to borrow when we graduate, right, from this school? Okay. And where does that fall in kind of the affordability spectrum? Every private scholarship in the country, right, for every community, all based in here. So you can search based on where you live, at ethnicity, etc. Once it comes time to fill out that FAFSA and CSS profile, we talked about our curriculum, our education. We're going to be doing it live frequently. But the point here is, and this has worked really well, is that it's kind of on demand. So as you're completing the FAFSA, as you're completing the CSS profile, you got line by line through the entire process, right from creating your FSA IDs to actually submitting the FAFSA. But beyond that, there's some strategy built in there, right? So we'll go like stop, red alert, pause. Do not put your retirement accounts on the FAFSA, right? Do not list a 529 as a student asset. It's a parent asset, okay? And then something else we're really proud of, and this was our first season that we had this live, is that families can upload their financial aid award letters. There's about 900 different ways that colleges present financial aid award letters. And we've worked with a branch of the Gates Foundation on this part of the technology, but they can upload their award letters, and it takes these 900 different ways that they're presented and puts them into one uniform way. So we can take all of them and say, okay, well, first, before we look at loans and work study, what's this school actually going to cost you, right? And then we can compare that side by side in, again, kind of an apples to apples way, which has been great, right? It's taken the confusion out of that process. And then finally, we're telling you, well, did you get a good deal? What is the likelihood you could go back to BU or wherever to appeal for more money based on your family situation, based on what their net price calculator says, based on what you actually got. So there's a whole bunch more in here, but again, I want to give you a quick feel for it. But let's look at an actual school. So if you guys want to just pop in a chat or a QA, wherever, put in some actual colleges and we'll look at one or two and kind of see how generous or not are they with financial aid, with scholarships. Okay, so let's look at, I'll look at the first one I saw here. Okay, so Harvey Mudd out there in Southern California, right? We see this really high sticker price, but for this family, we're going to pay, $27,000 thereabouts. Okay. Why is that the case? Well, we're going to get need-based grants, right, of about $60,000. If we want more why, we can go down to the financial aid tab and it's going to show us. Okay, great. That makes sense. Here's the methodology they use, and they meet 99% of need. I think that context is really helpful for folks that kind of want some more answers in terms of the why. Okay, let's go up the 5 a little bit down there in Southern California to Orange County, Chapman University. Okay, similar price point, similar area of the country, right? We're going to pay a lot more. Our net cost is going to be a lot higher there. And again, if we want to look at the why, well, this is a really smart kid, so they're going to get a really meaningful scholarship, $36,000. And again, if we want to look at why, we can see that. Now, for every scholarship in the country, we have every scholarship that they offer, and we're really good at projecting, well, why is this kid going to get this amount? And it's tied to, in this case, their GPA, and or their test scores. And again, kind of on that front, you can get some context to say, okay, well, that makes sense. Here's the average GPA at this school. Here's the average test score. Here's where my kid specifically stacks up. So you get the idea, and again, go bang around in here yourself, but hopefully that's helpful in terms of demonstrating what we're trying to accomplish, with our platform here. So, and again, just to kind of review where we started initially, if I can find the appropriate thing, give me a second here, because I just want to tease again, to make sure that everybody understands or leaves here with a clear understanding of, how we can potentially partner. We love.
Yeah, and let me just address a couple questions about how often we update. We are constantly updating the merit scholarships. We're coming up with our own proprietary projections, actually, because as Matt just said, that award letters can be uploaded. We're looking at what the colleges say they do, what they actually do. So those are constantly updated annually for other stuff that gets updated. So we have a whole data team that does nothing but that.
Yeah, and I forget the name of the software that we leverage anyways. It's not a household name, but any college that makes a change to their need-based financial aid or scholarships, and on any day we get pinged to say University of Southern California just changed the scholarship, right? And we'll immediately factor that into our formula, right? We try to do same business day. It's probably not that good, but so anyways, I mean, because the short answer is every day, right? We have three folks that live in here full-time. This is what they do. And along with a lot of the technology we're able to leverage. And like Peg said, the actual financial aid award letters that we get from families is a constant feedback loop to say, hey, is American University actually awarding aid the way that it says their net price calculator does? Can we trust their net price calculator? Or do we have to override that to account for how they actually award financial aid and scholarships, which of course is a moving target. So it's one of the hardest things that we do, I think, as a team, but something that we're very, very good at. And we know we'll never be perfect. There's just too much subjectivity there. But anyways, that's we feel incredibly comfortable with the projections that we're making versus anything else that you're going to find out there, including colleges' own net price calculators, which very, very few are proud of them, and none of them have their own, right? All of them outsource it to a third party. Okay, so again, just kind of where we started, for anybody that wants to work with us, we provide our education for free. There's free access to our software. There are colleges, or there are high schools rather, that similar to what you do with SCORE and Allowance will purchase seats for their families, right? But either way, we would love to talk to you about how we can work with you. And we have, I think, the best presenters you're going to find. Peg and I do it all the time. We've got great presenters from colleges across the country, right? University of Oklahoma, Harvard, MIT, Denison, the UCs, and then just folks, again, like Peg and myself, that have been doing this forever, for decades. And it's what we love to do and what we love to educate folks on every day. So again, especially this year with the FAFSA changes, I would firmly recommend that you are, unless you feel incredibly comfortable yourself, bring us in to help educate your families on how this thing is going to play out and what they can do. What they should be doing, what they should not be doing as they navigate this process, right? And again, especially these class 2024 being the guinea pig. So I'm just putting in the chat again, my link, if you want to book a time with me, tell me a little bit about your high school. I'll tell you how we typically partner, and our dates are filling up pretty stinking quick. I mean, we have a big team, so I'm sure we can accommodate you, but as you can imagine, I'd say more folks than ever are trying to get us in their building for this fall in particular. And then we'll give you that PDF too, so you can get a little bit more information about how we typically partner with schools, what our kind of base curriculum is, and keep that in mind. There's no one size fits all. We have a bunch of different ways that we partner with schools. And then we'll also give you, everybody's going to get the recording, right, Peg? And Peggy, man, loosening the reins, gonna share the slides, which is few and far between here. So
yeah, and just a side note to Elizabeth, use the link that we just posted in the chat. I was copying stuff and I sent you the wrong link. So just ignore what I put in the Q&A. Matt's calendar, I'm looking for my message to you and I can't find it. There's so many questions.
Don't worry about it. So my link, I'm putting it in here.
Yeah, and I just put it in the chat again. So just ignore my craziness of what I just pasted to you inaccurately. I'm trying to find your message and I can't find it. It's one of those days. So anyways.
Yeah, and I'll just share this with anybody that wants to, but if you want to upgrade to the if you're a school counselor, please do not, you know what, I can't share that, there's too many of you guys to share that, but if you want to upgrade to the premium version of software to bounce around, just book a time with me or write into support and, or write into counselors at, collegeaidpro.com and we can get you access. But even the free version, it'll give you a very good idea of what the platform is all about. And you can
Yeah, and a few people wrote in and about their specific situations. Just book the time with Matt. He's happy to chat with you about it. We're happy to talk about your school. And if you talked to him previously about something, just ping him and we can continue the conversation.
Okay, lots of information in a short period of time, guys. Like I said, we're not going anywhere, please. And you know, we have on our website, collegeaidpro.com. Let me just pop it in there. We have kind of a, you know, a dedicated page just for school counselors. We're consistently doing events. So, you know, however we can help you, whether that's your office, whether it's counselors, whether it's students, whether it's families, whatever. That's our deal. We're here for you.
Yep.
Hey, Peggy.
Have a great day and a great beginning of the school year if you've already started.
Oh yeah. All right, and enjoy the rest of the summer for those of us in the Northeast here.
Yeah, not here. All right, bye-bye.